The Cold War narrative is that it was a fight between capitalism and communism. But really, it was a fight to keep colonialism alive and any opposition, be it communism or not, dead. The Cold War was the rising of the Third World. Countries like Vietnam or Cuba or Chile or Algeria, these countries were going against the rich exploiters, the white male billionaires and their politicians. Communism is just euphemism for opposition. Most countries weren't communist. They were just poor and decided that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be poor anymore. So, for example, the USSR turned a backwards peasant country into a country where everyone could read, where everyone had healthcare, education, employment, and housing, where there were no billionaires, no top 0.1%. Is that communism? If communism just means more equality and welfare, sure. But would you describe capitalism as just billionaires exist and they get tax breaks? I wouldn't. And I wouldn't define the USSR or Cuba or China or Vietnam as communists either. They're just opposition to the white first world. China today could be doing a lot more to pressure Israel. They're not exactly saints. They give out loans in their own interest, although those loans are better than neocolonialism. However, the fact remains that China is the underdog and they're not the ones backing a genocide. They're not the ones doing colonialism. While America lets billionaires buy their way into government, China disappears their billionaires. China is the third world. America is the first. Similarly, the USSR was the opposition to the West during the Cold War. The USSR never founded itself on slavery and segregation and genociding the natives. The USSR wasn't the one that backed fascist genocidal regimes in Latin America. The USSR wasn't the one who basically committed a genocide in Vietnam. Wasn't the one who supported genocide in Indonesia, wasn't the one trying to continue resource exploitation in the DRC. Indeed, the USSR was not the one who colonized the world. If the USSR was just as bad as the US and Europe, as liberals like to say, show me the evidence. When did the USSR colonize every single continent? When did they back several genocides in the span of a few decades and committed a genocide themselves? Is famine a genocide? So the Great Depression was a genocide. Let's not use the word genocide so lightly here. Genocide means a significant other dying, multiplied thousands, millions of times. That's what the US did in Latin America. Imagine your whole family and all your friends dying by execution squad in front of you, and that repeating thousands of times over. That's what's happening in Palestine. A conflict due to rich people wanting more power in the Middle East, wanting the military-industrial complex to keep going. This was colonialism. This was World War I and World War II. This was the Cold War. This is the world today. Rich people killing and oppressing poor people. Now, you may think those poor people have done some terrible things, especially Soviet leadership during Stalin. But the fact remains, it is rich versus poor. America and Europe has the power, not Russia, not China, not Cuba, not Vietnam. America could have chosen diplomacy, but more times than not, he decided to coup and bomb countries. And the only president that thought maybe cooing every country in the world was bad got assassinated. In the USSR, women were immediately put into the workforce and abortion was legalized in 1920. I'm not saying the USSR was a utopia, that it did no wrong, but the wrongs it did do is in the context of it being part of the third world. For example, censorship. The USSR censored because it was the Cold War and a powerful, rich country is trying to infiltrate you. The US also suppressed any communist, any anti-Western sentiment at home and abroad, going as far as genocide to achieve this end. Today, capitalism monitors us through the internet. The mainstream media suppresses any anti-Israeli sentiment. The US censors and monitors you mainly for profit. The police monitors and arrests protesters for expressing their First Amendment, for not quote unquote being peaceful when being terrorized by pigs. Richest democracy in the world, by the way. Again, not justifying Soviet censorship. It was stupid and probably harmed the country more than it helped. But we can see why they did it. And obviously, the USSR wasn't the same all throughout its life. During Khrushchev, censorship was less strict. Another example, gulags would hit a peak during wartime and they started declining after Stalin ending in 1960. Last time I checked, Americans' prison population is still sky high during peacetime in the 21st century. Yet no scary name or reputation for the American prisons, which allow for torture and slavery. To prove my point further, the Holodomor was when the USSR was literally impoverished, coming right out of feudalism and war. Does that excuse their mismanagement of the famine? No, but it shows a double standard when the Bengal famine, for example, is mentioned nowhere near as much, even though the British had all the resources in the world to stop it. Unlike the USSR, people always focus on when the USSR was impoverished and facing war after war, but never its landing on Mars and Venus, or how it became the second biggest economy from the ruins of feudalism and World War II. Never how Stalin tried to form an anti-Nazi alliance before World War II. And most of all, people never mention how the USSR was poor and America was rich from all its genociding and colonialism. Again, the USSR was barely even communist. But in America, people have to work several minimum wage jobs while constantly being on the brink of poverty. A single healthcare bill can bankrupt you, while billionaires haven't paid taxes since Reagan. In the USSR, people were guaranteed employment and had healthcare and housing. If I had to choose between America's, honestly, pretty good civil rights, if you know how to use them, that is, or the USSR's economic rights, I'd choose the USSR every time. I mean, yes, it's great how many civil rights Americans have, but freedom of speech is used to spread fascist propaganda, and the right to carry is used to carry out mass shootings. And Trump nullified due process anyway, so, fucking hell, civil rights mean nothing. Give me the welfare. Okay, I don't think I got my point across very well. This video was about identity politics. How some baby leftists focus on identity politics too much and miss the point of Marxism, which is material analysis. They focus too much on race and trans rights and the Muslims, Arabs. They forget how those things are invented, how race was invented because they needed to justify slavery, and how material analysis is the most important thing. Don't focus on the trans identity, the black identity. They matter because economic injustice, political injustice, etc., etc. And same thing with the label of socialist or communist. It's just an identity. That why do socialists support the USSR? Because it called itself communist? No, because it gave people literacy. It rapidly industrialized and improved people's quality of life. Those what did the USSR actually do? Not what its political ideology is. I mean, that's important, but I mean, it's not as important as what it actually did. America could call itself communist and it wouldn't matter. So the Cold War was all about identities, okay? So we need to just move away from that. Observe things more objectively. How to move away from this, first world perspective and see what's like from the third world's perspective, from poor people's perspective, like the USSR, like China, like Cuba, like Vietnam. Those poor people, what do they see? Well, they see rich empire coming in with their army, with their military, and just bombing the shit out of Vietnam. Using their economic might to threaten Cuba. But the word capitalism, that's not an actual analysis. That's just a shorthand for an economic system, actual policies and etc. It's about finding how things work. Identity politics is commodity fetishism. Okay, it hides, it obscures the production process, it obscures material analysis, and leaves you with the end product of an identity. It tries to distract you from how those identities are produced. Gillian Rose in Marxist Modernism, collection of lectures, speaks all about this. Commodity fetishism, how Lukács started it, and then French theory was like, oh my god, this is actually a really good idea, and then you got a bunch of critical theory bullshit. Yeah,